India must be careful in picking up best practices from elsewhere in drafting a data protection law. Can India have a uniform data protection law? Where should India pick its data protection regulations from? What is the significance of data protection? What should be done now? GS Paper 2, Government Policies and Interventions for Development in Various Sectors and Issues Arising out of Their Design and Implementation. What is the context about? A stringent data protection law is urgently needed in India to address the mounting concerns over privacy of citizens as the country is moving in a big way towards digital governance. Leading experts have said, with the European General Data Protection Regulation coming into effect on May 25, 2018, the absence of a comparable regulation across the Atlantic poses a question for India. What path should it take? Should it follow the US or Europe? Or in fact, should India take the lead in this regard? Can India have a uniform data protection law? The peculiar case of India has following issues in uniform data protection law. India relies on many imported technologies which follows the standards of their origin countries and have dissimilar rules for data protection. Major players are not only based abroad but also send data to overseas and thus beyond India's jurisdiction because of lack of infrastructure of data localization. Layering of consent of users makes it more difficult because sometimes by agreeing to the service itself, sensitive data will be taken from users. Data protection rules are embedded into technologies by software developers according to their beliefs, culture, domestic law, and organizational ethics, which may not reflect India's statutory considerations. The user data is sometimes shared with those jurisdictions which have similar and adequate measures, but there is no guarantee that data will be protected from unauthorized use. Where should India pick its data protection regulations from? As India stands at a crossroads, it should chart its course, picking up the best ideas and practices that promote user control over data. This requires adaptation from both the US and the GDPR. Our challenges are extensive and our interests diverse. Here, virtue lies in the humility to learn from others and care to protect our residents. As a public policy goal, we should borrow freely but use such knowledge within legal regulations to enlarge individual liberty. What is the significance of data protection? Data protection is a bigger part of our lives, but often we ignore its importance. We come across data protection issues at work, when browsing the internet, when dealing with public authorities, when we can shop, when we can book tickets online, in many other circumstances. As digitalization increases, more and more of our data is being captured. How this data is used and held is becoming increasingly important. However, it is well known that most citizens all over the world are unaware their rights in relation to data protection, and some people are breaching data protection laws unknowingly on a daily basis. What should be done now? The need of the hour is a comprehensive legislation that provides for a right to privacy as a fundamental entitlement to citizens. The groundwork for such legislation has already been laid in 2012 by a Justice A.P. Shah-headed group of experts constituted by the Planning Commission. The Commission had proposed a set of national privacy principles that would place an obligation on data controllers to put in place safeguards and procedures that would enable and ensure protection of privacy rights. These include notice to be given to the users while collecting data, choice and consent of users while collecting data from them, collection limitation to keep user data collected at the minimum necessary, purpose limitation to keep the purpose as adequately defined and narrow as possible, access and correction for end users to correct or delete their personal data as may be necessary, disclosure of information. Private data should not be disclosed without explicit consent of end user. Security, defining responsibility to ensure technical, administrative, and physical safeguards for data collected. Openness, informing end users of possible collection and utilization of personal data. Accountability, institutionalize accountability for adherence to these principles.